In the depths of Irvine, California, lies a studio full of great minds. Minds that incorporate and converge with each other to create rich and expansive worlds full of interesting characters and thoughtful lore. Obsidian Entertainment, the creators of hit games like The Outer Worlds, South Park: The Stick of Truth, and of course Fallout New Vegas, are a studio bent on creating highly acclaimed sequels to legendary properties as well as creating their own well-crafted titles. The studio is founded on the philosophy of player agency and empowerment, to create stories where the player is the main character of the story they alter. How did such an independent studio at the time gain the ability to not only work on Fallout, but as well as Star Wars? Who are the founders of Obsidian, and where are they at today? In this documentary, we will learn about the inception of this legendary studio, as well as what the studio has planned for its players. This is the history of Obsidian Entertainment. In order to get the complete history of Obsidian, we need to go back to before the company was even created. In 1996, Irvine, California, Firkus Urquhart created Black Isle Studios, a studio hyper-focused on the creation of computer role-playing games, CRPGs for short. Black Isle was named after Urquhart's homeland in Scotland, and was also a subsidiary of Interplay Entertainment. Though the studio is most often seen as the developer of the original Fallout games, this is only partially true. Black Isle didn't develop the original Fallout, rather the studio employed the majority of the original team that created Fallout and went on to create one of my personal favorites, Fallout 2. Games like Fallout 2, Planetscape Torment, Icewind Dale, Icewind Dale Heart of Winter, Icewind Dale Heart of Winter Trials of the Luremaster, Icewind Dale 2, and Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance 2 were developed by Black Isle within the years of 1998 to 2004 respectively. Black Isle also published Baldur's Gate Tales of the Sword Coast, Baldur's Gate 2 Shadows of Amn, Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance, Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance 2, Baldur's Gate 2 Throne of Baal, and Lionheart Legacy of the Crusader, between the years of 1998 to 2003 respectively. In 1998, Interplay Entertainment filed for bankruptcy. The parent company was continuously struggling with bankruptcy for years when Hervey Kane, the new CEO after the takeover by Titus Software, sold several game properties and laid off the entirety of Black Isle Studios on December 8, 2003. Stonekeep 2 Godmaker, Torn, Fallout 3 Van Buren, Baldur's Gate 3 The Black Hound, Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance 3, and Project V13, Fallout Online, were all cancelled with little hope to return. Before Black Isle ceased to exist, many of the studio's best and brightest would have already left. Urquhart and most of his staff members were dissatisfied with and frustrated with the cancellation of Baldur's Gate 3 The Black Hound, as the game was already being developed for over a year and a half. Urquhart became convinced that staying at Black Isle was no longer a viable option for the team, and decided to leave the company. Another reason for Urquhart's departure was because of the push to console Interplay was entertaining. Urquhart said, "Interplay wants to focus on console titles, and I don't think the future of gaming is entirely on console. I enjoy developing games for both console and PC, and abandoning one completely for the other is not a direction that I would like my career to go." Firkus Urquhart, Darren Monahan, Chris Jones, Chris Parker, and Chris Avalon went on to create a brand new independent video game company. When the newfound studio began, only 7 individuals were employed to the company, including the 5 founding fathers. It was at this time that they needed to decide on a name. After we've left Black Isle, we were going to start a company, and we needed a new name. We wanted it to be a good name, a strong name, and we wanted it to be something that people would remember. And so we threw all these names around. We had Scorched Earth, we had 3 Clown Software, and lots of other stuff. And eventually Obsidian got on that list, because we were Black Isle, and what's something like that? And someone said that there's that Obsidian thing, that glassy magma stuff, and we put it on there. So we came down literally with a short list, and we showed it to our significant others. And they were all like, all these names are dumb, except that one. So it really was the significant others that actually said that's what they would name the company, because it sounds cool, it has some relevance, and it's not 3 Clown Software. Obsidian needed more capital in order to keep their operation running, so they sought out support from publishers. They approached Electronic Arts, but it did not result on the project. The studio also contacted Ubisoft, looking to make a Might and Magic game, but Ubisoft instead ended up contracting with Arcane Studios on that project. Obsidian pitched a game to Take-Two Interactive called Future Blight, which was described as a Fallout-style game. Unfortunately, Future Blight was never made. Now, it is no secret that BioWare and Black Isle/Obsidian were pretty closely related to each other. They both created CRPGs that were very similar, and Black Isle even published some of BioWare's games. So when Obsidian emerged, they landed on an opportunity by former LucasArts president Simon Jeffrey. Initially, Obsidian wanted to create a first-person party-based RPG that included lightsaber combat and iconic characters like R2-D2. Basically, think of Skyrim, but Star Wars. The idea was interesting, but Jeffrey instead asked if they would be willing to create the sequel to BioWare's Knights of the Old Republic. Obsidian was already familiar with the KOTOR engine, and so Knights of the Old Republic 2, The Sith Lords, began production in late 2003. LucasArts was adamant that the game would be released on Christmas of 2004, only giving the team at Obsidian 15 months to create a full-fledged RPG that was supposed to be bigger and better than the original. As it would turn out, 15 months wouldn't be enough time, and the many technical bugs and issues didn't help either. LucasArts initially gave an extension to 2005, but it was reverted back to Holiday 04 during E3 2004. Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2 The Sith Lords would release to positive reviews and critical acclaim despite the numerous bug issues and missing content. On a happier note, fans of the game released the Constant Restoration mod in 2012 that fully completed the developer's vision. Seriously guys, if you haven't played KOTOR 2 with a restoration mod, you are missing out. It honestly surpasses the original Knights of the Old Republic, in my humble opinion. Now, prior to the release of KOTOR 2, Atari of all companies approached Obsidian in hopes for the company to make a sequel to Neverwinter Nights, another game initially created by BioWare. Because of Obsidian's initiative to create multiple projects simultaneously, they accepted the offer, and in July of 2005, development began. Monahan and Avalon headed the project, and Obsidian's team of now 50 people led development, with BioWare working as a support studio. Neverwinter Nights 2 harkened back to the isometric RPG days of the original Fallout and Baldur's Gate. Obsidian updated Neverwinter Nights' Aurora engine considerably and endowed its role-playing system with depth and distinguishing features. The team weren't given sufficient enough time for the game's development, and Atari was willing to delay the project's target release window from Christmas 2005 to October 31, 2006. While the camera perspective was and remains a problem, the game did suffer from several other issues at release. Much like KOTOR 2, it was considered successful and critically acclaimed in spite of all the bugs. From here on out, Obsidian would enter a bit of a dark period, trying to distinguish themselves from other RPG studios out there. Before the release of Neverwinter Nights 2, Obsidian was approached by Disney to create a sequel to Snow White and the Seven Dwarves of all things. The project was called Dwarves, and was allegedly a third-person action RPG developed for the PS3 and Xbox 360. Their idea was a prequel with a darker tone intended to explain the origins of the cast, taking inspiration from Lord of the Rings. The plot would have been about the seven dwarves journeying together with a young girl to stop an evil wizard finding an ancient dwarven power. However, things are not what they seem, as it is revealed that the dwarves have been manipulated by the young girl, who is the daughter of the wizard. She betrays the dwarves and curses her father, proceeding to take over the kingdom, and thus setting up the original movie. The project reached the prototype stage, but due to the change in management at the Walt Disney Company, Snow White was deemed, quote, untouchable, and thus the project got cancelled. Obsidian was ecstatic about the project and was heartbroken when it got cancelled. When the lifecycle for Neverwinter Nights 2 was coming to an end, Obsidian was approached by three separate publishers: EA, Sega, and Atari. EA saw the potential within Obsidian and trusted them to create a competitor to The Elder Scrolls IV: Oblivion, but nothing ever came of this project. Atari wanted to bring Obsidian back to work on Baldur's Gate in the form of Baldur's Gate 3, but due to financial problems, the project was shelved. The third and final developer was Sega, who wanted Obsidian to create an action RPG set in the Alien universe. Alien's Crucible was set to feature base building, dialogue choices, and character customization. Chris Avellone described the game essentially as Mass Effect, but a lot more terrifying. A demo for the game was also created and sent to Sega, but the publisher canceled the game before even playing it.
What the fuck?
Avellone also said that there are a lot of similarities between the Alien prequel movie Prometheus and the Alien RPG, but the game allegedly was a lot darker than Prometheus. Now, despite the cancellation of Alien's Crucible, Sega was still interested in working with Obsidian. Sega asked for a new original IP, and Obsidian came up with Alpha Protocol. Now, according to Firkus, Sega loved it, and they said, hey, this is different, it's not dragons, it's not phasers, you don't see a lot of spy RPGs. Sometimes we go, maybe there's a reason for that. Development began in March of 2006, but no personnel were assigned to lead roles on Alpha Protocol. The development team did not have much direction for the game, and they did not know its target audience. Neither did they prepare any documents for the game's design and development. The team also struggled with designing stealth for the game, due to their lack of experience and technical difficulties caused within Unreal Engine 3. Production was very slow, and very out of focus, and it wasn't until 2 years later until Chris Avellone volunteered to become the game's lead designer. Alpha Protocol took inspiration from classic spy thrillers and spy icons such as James Bond, Jack Bauer, and many of the over-top characters seen in the Kill Bill franchise. The game is a spy adventure. Players' in-game choices affect the world's state. The morality in the game was designed to be ambiguous, reflecting its real-world setting. Players can choose to spare or kill all the enemies without knowing who their allies and enemies truly are. The way the main character, Michael Thornton, would respond to NPCs who would imply consequences and affect their perception of Thornton. The team ensured that no matter which moral path the player took, they would be rewarded. The team did not want to punish players for playing the game in a certain way. Michael Thornton was designed to be an everyman, allowing players to choose their playstyle freely without having to conform to a particular style of play. To complement the spy theme of the game, the team added a timer to the dialogue system to further immerse players into the game and make intrinsic decisions. The dialogue stance system meant voice actors had to record the same lines using several different tones. The game's location was set across the globe, and the team wanted players to feel Thornton as an international super spy. Many features were either cut or reworked via characters, parkour, environmental interactions, minigames, and the option to play as a female Michael Thornton. The sophisticated AI was also nerfed because it was deemed too advanced for the game to run correctly. Alpha Protocol was announced in 2008 and was released a year later to mediocre reviews. The game was also overshadowed by the aforementioned Mass Effect, created by BioWare. Mass Effect caused a bigger buzz in the gaming industry, despite the stark similarities between Alpha Protocol, and once again, Obsidian was left in the shadow of BioWare. Unfortunately, for Alpha Protocol fans, a sequel is not likely despite how willing Obsidian would be to develop it. The rights are now owned by Sega, and it is pretty safe to say that they were not pleased with the finished product. And then, something beautiful happened. As you may recall, many of the developers that worked at Obsidian were also responsible for working on the original 2 Fallout games, but the Fallout IP was bought by another studio in 2004 after Interplay went 6 feet under. The studio that obtained the rights was none other than Bethesda Game Studios, creators of the Elder Scrolls series. Bethesda recognized that a large majority of the Fallout veterans worked at Obsidian Entertainment, so they offered a deal. The deal was to create a brand new Star Trek game. No, seriously, Bethesda wanted Obsidian to possibly do something with the Star Trek IP, but like many other ideas, the game was scrapped. Instead, the idea for Obsidian to possibly do something with Fallout percolated between studios. Once the idea was finalized, Bethesda ran off to create the next installation of the Elder Scrolls, and Obsidian returned home, creating one of the best video games of all time. Fallout New Vegas was announced to the world in 2009, helming both Josh Sawyer as the director and Chris Avellone as both the writer and director of the additional add-ons. Initially, the idea was to create a game set in Las Vegas that took place in between the events of Fallout 1 and 2, but only half this idea was rejected. The game instead took place in the Mojave Wasteland after the events of Bethesda's Fallout 3. New Vegas took to many ideas from Black Isle's original Fallout 3 that was cancelled all the way back in 2003, being revitalized to fit within the new lore found within modern-day Fallout. Many design aspects of Fallout 3 were reworked in New Vegas, including a different morality system, hardcore mode, and aim-down sights. Now you'll notice many similarities between the development of New Vegas and KOTOR 2. The game was to be a follow-up with one of the most critically acclaimed video games of that generation. However, Obsidian was given a very short time frame of 18 months. Not only did they need to be on par, or possibly even better than the original, but they also had to work with a broken engine. The Gamebryo engine is notoriously buggy, and Obsidian was unfamiliar with the engine. So much so, they even contacted community modders of previous Bethesda titles to gain a little extra help. New Vegas would meet the deadline on October 19, 2010, and would receive widespread critical acclaim despite how broken the launch game was. The game featured 65,000 lines of dialogue, which is 25,000 more than Fallout 3, and is generally considered not only one of the best Fallout games of all time, but one of the best video games of all time. Though Fallout New Vegas may have been a cultural landmine in the gaming community, it wasn't enough to keep Obsidian on its feet. Bethesda promised the California team a bonus if they reach an 85 or higher on Metacritic, but unfortunately the team would only receive a score of 84 due to the bugs and glitches previously mentioned. New Vegas was vital to Obsidian in many different ways, but most importantly, it was the first AAA game release they had ever done. Despite how great the game was, many fans would be loath to never touch an Obsidian game again due to how broken their games are upon launch. Obsidian would vow to manage quality assurance more efficiently from here on out. This was the first step they took when developing their new project, Dungeon Siege 3. Dungeon Siege is an action role-playing game developed by Gas-Powered Games that takes place in the pseudo-medieval kingdom of Ebb. In 2010, Square Enix bought the rights to Dungeon Siege from Gas-Powered Games, and would soon approach a certain developer that had recently fallen on their ass. Due to Obsidian Entertainment's financial struggle, they were almost forced to sign a contract with Square Enix to work on a game series they had no prior experience with. During the development of Dungeon Siege 3, the project was heavily monitored by Square Enix, offering little to no room for creative control on Obsidian's part. The third installment of the Dungeon Siege series was quoted as a mass-market fantasy action RPG with an Obsidian-style story, but the developers found this combination to be incompatible. On the bright side, however, Obsidian was allowed to use their own proprietary Onyx engine, which allowed the developers to create graphically appealing settings. Though originally slated for a release on May 27, 2011, Dungeon Siege 3 would be delayed into June 21, 2011 in North America. Dungeon Siege 3 marked the first time the series was on console, as the previous series were only on PC. However, the game would receive lukewarm responses from critics. Looting and managing inventory was complicated and unorganized, and the voice acting was subpar as well as the soundtrack, and the game lacked variety. Obsidian did its job under the control of Square Enix, so the blame for the mediocrity of the game, let's say, is up for debate. In October of 2009, South Park creators Trey Parker and Matt Stone were inspired to create a role-playing video game set in the South Park universe, as they were big fans of the genre. South Park Digital Studios would get into contact with Obsidian in 2009. At first, Obsidian thought that they were being pranked by another studio that resided in the same building as them. That was until they met with Parker and Stone. It wasn't until the release of Fallout New Vegas that the creators were convinced that Obsidian was the right studio to work with, as Parker was a big fan of the video game. Obsidian would soon fall under another project where they had little creative control due to Parker and Stone's already fleshed out vision of the video game, but they retained the same vision of a South Park game, with the same animation style as the TV show. Now, South Park games have had an interesting history. The very first South Park game, appropriately named South Park, was released on Windows, N64, and the PlayStation in the years of 1998 and 1999. It was a strange first-person shooter that saw Stan, Kyle, Cartman, and Kenny throw snowballs at enemies including rabid mutant turkeys, deformed clones of the townsfolk, alien visitors, berserk robots, and sentient killer toys. The game would receive lukewarm reviews. Then we would see South Park Chef's Love Shack in 1999, South Park Rally in 2000, South Park Let's Go Tower Defense Play 9 years later, and South Park Tenderman's Revenge in 2012. One thing all these games have in common is their disconnection from the creators of the show, something that's quite unthinkable considering it is South Park. This is what would separate The Stick of Truth from other South Park games, given its direct involvement of Trey Parker and Matt Stone. It is said that the original script of the video game was over 500 pages long, and was heavily inspired by Bethesda's Elder Scrolls V: Skyrim. Funding for this new South Park game was complicated. Originally, Viacom, the parent company of Comedy Central, was funding the game, but became wary of video games soon after. Funding was then sent off to THQ for Obsidian to sign with, but unfortunately for Obsidian, THQ was neck deep in a financial crisis. This was scary for Obsidian, because without funding, they were worried the studio would fall under the same boss with THQ. Later in development, an auction was held for an assortment of THQ titles, the South Park game being one of them. This didn't bode well with both Obsidian and South Park Studios, as they did not consent to being auctioned off to other publishers. South Park Studios contested the auction, but unfortunately for them, the US bankruptcy court sided with THQ and the rights to The Stick of Truth were for sale. Ubisoft would then buy the game from THQ for only $3.2 million, which, in all honesty, isn't that much. After the Ubisoft acquisition, many aspects of the game were changed. Unfortunately for the public, a majority of these changes were deemed too complicated to get into detail, but for one, we know the game was too big. Because of these overhauls, the game was delayed into March 2014. When the time came, South Park The Stick of Truth would release to the public, garnering widespread critical acclaim. The game would receive an 85 on Metacritic and was deemed one of the most faithful video game adaptations of a TV show ever. The game was hilarious, story was absurd, combat was enticing, and the snowy terrain of South Park, Colorado was immersive. However, because it is a South Park game, it would undergo its fair share of censorship in Australia, Singapore, Hong Kong, Germany, Austria, and Taiwan. The censored scenes in question were the alien probing segments as well as the interactive abortion minigame that the player would have to do. The German version was specifically censored because of the use of Nazi and Hitler-related imagery, which are illegal in that country. But overall, the game was a success. The start of the 8th generation of video game consoles was rough, and I mean rough. While the latter half of the PS3's life cycle was absolutely fantastic, it wasn't the best for the 360. PlayStation was riding off of the success from the PS3, which of course helped boost the sales of the PS4. Xbox, on the other hand, was focused on everything that they shouldn't have been. From the egregious reveal conference and the lack of exclusives, the start of the Xbox One was underwhelming at best. It was during this time that Microsoft was swinging around to various developers to possibly create exclusive Xbox One games. Obsidian was one of those studios. Microsoft approached them in hopes of creating an exclusive launch title for the machine. The project was known as Stormlands, but unfortunately the project was scrapped due to conflicting visions between both Microsoft and Obsidian. Stormlands was going to be an MMORPG akin to the likes of The Witcher, with the classic Obsidian spin on it. The game was set in the world full of crazy storms, where the storms themselves factored into your magic. According to Firkus Urquhart, Microsoft described the idea of the game as so. Imagine you're playing The Witcher, maybe with a friend. What happens if at points in time a giant creature pops up that you can see in the distance, and it's not just popping up while you're playing, it's popping up for everybody who's playing. You all rush to this creature, and there's a haze around it. And as you're all rushing through the haze, the game is matchmaking you into 40-man raids who are going to fight the creature. Then you fight it. But while the creature is being fought, all the footage is being recorded up into the cloud. Then at the end, we would come up with some kind of intelligent editing thing which would deliver everybody who fought a personalized edited video of their participation in the raid. That is what was proposed to us. Obsidian had a big opportunity here, bigger than South Park, bigger than Fallout. It was evident that Obsidian cared about this project, so much so they even made a working demo for the Xbox 360. The demo showed a lot: a soundtrack, fully rendered character models, and even an interactable female companion. So what went wrong? Well, as I said before, Microsoft and Obsidian had conflicting visions. Microsoft wanted million men raids, and they quite literally meant million men raids. Obsidian thought they were joking at first, but when they presented the project to Microsoft, they kept on saying make it bigger and bigger, something that just isn't possible given the technical limitations of what was Unreal Engine 3 at the time. Eventually, they got the call that the game was cancelled, and Obsidian would soon have to gather everybody and lay off roughly 20 to 30 people. Obsidian later transformed the game into a project now known as Fallen. The game was sent to both 2K and Ubisoft, but unfortunately, they never heard back. All was not lost though. Remnants of Fallen were later used in a game named Tyranny, but we'll get into that game later. In classic Obsidian fashion, once again the studio was in a rough place. Despite the overwhelming success of South Park and Fallout New Vegas, the studio was struggling financially. Not only did they miss the bonus from Bethesda by only 1 Metacritic point, they were also given a small amount of money for their work on Stormlands. All signs were pointing towards bankruptcy, something that was all too familiar with the former developers of Black Isle. When all hope was lost, a potential idea was brought to the table, something that was new to developers at the time. The idea was to have a brand new crowdfunded video game via Kickstarter. There was a lot of debate among members of the company, the most persistent fear being not able to raise the adequate amount for development. However, across the horizon they looked over at a fellow independent company by the name of Double Fine. They saw that the game Broken Age was crowdfunded by fans of Double Fine with a budget of $3.3 million from over 87,000 backers, $2.5 million more than they initially asked for. Once Obsidian saw that, it was settled, and a new game was set to be developed and funded by Kickstarter. For a long time, the team at Obsidian wanted to make the spiritual successor to Baldur's Gate. Seeing as how BioWare was moved on from the isometric RPG format, Obsidian felt the obligation to do so. On September 10th, 2012, Obsidian's webpage began teasing a brand new game entitled Project X. Very original, I know. The next day, a countdown was initiated. On September 14th, 2012, the Kickstarter campaign went live, revealing further details of the project. Obsidian was asking for at the very least $1.1 million, a goal they reached in just little over 24 hours. In the days following, they would surpass the stretch goals exclaimed on the website, and on the final day, they reached $4 million. At the time, this was the largest amount of money ever crowdfunded for a video game before. Soon after, the official title of Project X was announced, now known as Pillars of Eternity. What is great about crowdfunded video games is that the developers are free to return to their roots without much publisher interference. What Kickstarter does is it lets us make a game that is absolutely reminiscent of those great games, since trying to get that funded through traditional publisher would be next to impossible. The similarities between Pillars and Baldur's Gate are stark, making Pillars a direct love letter to veteran fans of Obsidian and Black Isle. In March 2014, it was announced that Paradox Interactive would publish the game. However, Paradox's role would only be taking care of the marketing and distribution of the game, while Obsidian would still retain the rights to Pillars. On March 26, 2015, Obsidian released Pillars of Eternity to Microsoft Windows, Mac OS X, and Linux, with console versions set to release soon after. The game received overwhelmingly positive reviews, with solid 8s and 9s out of 10s across the board. Pillars was significant for Obsidian, and single-handedly saved the company from bankruptcy. Not something to take lightly. In the summer of 2015, one of Obsidian's founding fathers, Chris Avellone, announced his departure from the studio. The explicit reasons as to why Avellone left were unknown and is only speculative. However, he has recently cleared up some reasons in an interview, saying that Obsidian was always on the lower end of the totem pole when it came to pay, something Avellone felt he deserved more of. On top of pay, the management at Obsidian wasn't the best at times due to unqualified staff, attempted nepotism, and pure stubbornness. Avellone would soon leave Obsidian and almost immediately begin work with Ghost Story Games. The following month, Obsidian announced their collaboration with Russian developer Alad's team to create a localized version of Skyforge, a science fiction fantasy MMORPG. It would soon release after the announcement. In the following years, Obsidian would release a mobile game entitled Pathfinder Adventures, a game based on the tabletop Pathfinder role-playing game. Months after Avallone's departure, Obsidian would announce a collaboration with studios In Exile and Double Fine in creating a brand new crowdfunding website by the name of Fig. Fig is very similar to Kickstarter, but with an aim to offer equity crowdfunding and a focus exclusively on video game-related projects. In 2006, a concept came into question via a game titled Fury. Fury was set to take place in a world where there was a magical apocalypse that decimated the world. Unfortunately, the project was scrapped. In 2009, another game by the name of Defiance was being pitched and allegedly used tons of ideas from the cancelled Fury game, but once again, the project was canned. As previously mentioned before, these games served as the basis for the Stormlands game that was set to be developed for Xbox One, but we know what happened to that project. Due to the success of Pillars of Eternity, Obsidian was in a much more flexible position, thus spawned the creation of Tyranny. Tyranny takes place in a world named Terratus, a high fantasy world where technology is currently transitioning from the Bronze Age to the Iron Age. The world of Terratus is already enveloped in a cloud of evil that has already won, and it is up to the player to alter the planet based on his/hers decisions. Tyranny uses a modified version of the Unity engine, used as the basis for Pillars of Eternity. Since most of the technical issues of graphics and rendering were all solved with Pillars, they were free to flesh out a different type of role-playing game. Tyranny uses a skill-based growth system rather than a class-based one as seen in Pillars. The developers also said that they wanted to allow players to find ways to play a character they wanted to instead of forcing them into a defined class. They also wanted to make sure that players could work to revamp characters midway through the game without any penalty, avoiding the situation where players may have built out a character that is difficult to use to progress into the late game. Tyranny was announced at the 2016 Game Developer Conference and later released that year to generally favorable reviews but lackluster sales. Praised for its insightful exploration of evil and wonder of exploration, once again, Obsidian created another sleeper hit that would go under the nose of most players. For the first time in Obsidian history, the developer was able to create a sequel to one of the games they had previously created, that being Pillars of Eternity 2, Deadfire. Development of Pillars 2 started only a year after the release of the first Pillars game, and much like the previous entry, the game was crowdfunded, but this time on Fig. Once again, Obsidian asked for $1.1 million, but towards the end reached $4.4 million. Pillars 2 was hellbent to improve upon the negatives the first game had and possibly make it bigger and better. On May 8th of 2018, Pillars of Eternity 2: Deadfire was released once again on Windows, Mac, and Linux to positive reviews all across the board. However, Josh Sawyer exclaimed that the game did a little worse than they were initially aiming for. The game was later released on consoles in 2020. For years, the longing for Obsidian to do another Fallout project was floating in the air. After the highly anticipated Fallout 4 released, many dedicated fans were disappointed and believed that their title should be handed over to Obsidian. Luckily for us, they were working on something similar. Something, might I dare say, contends with modern-day Fallout. The inclusion of Fallout veterans Tim Kaine and Leonard Boyarsky in 2011-16 respectively ignited a fire within Obsidian. Seeing as how Kaine just missed out on the release of Fallout New Vegas, Tim had an itch to create his own first-person open-world RPG akin to the likes of Fallout New Vegas. Tim knew he couldn't do it alone, so he called upon his friend Leonard Boyarsky to assist him in the art direction of this new project. While being essentially locked in a room for 3 months, both Boyarsky and Kaine would merge their ideas for a brand new IP. Eventually, they landed on a game that would meet Fallout and the TV show Firefly. This project would be now known as The Outer Worlds. Obsidian fashioned this project to be very ambitious, but early in development, they knew they had to cut back on some story beats that would have led to the ending. Therefore, many reviewers were flabbergasted when the end of the game happened relatively quickly. Of course, since it was an RPG, the game devs had to go about the many ways players would want to experience the game, whether that was killing everybody in sight or smooth talking your way out of every situation. The universe of The Outer Worlds was inspired by an assortment of different video games and television shows. Of course, they followed in the footsteps of the Fallout franchise, as well as the show Firefly, Futurama, Deadwood, and the movie True Grit. The Outer Worlds is a perfect example of the space western genre, mixing an assortment of different nerdy sci-fi stuff with the raw grittiness of the Old West. Much like the show Firefly, Obsidian delved into the most prominent feature of their games, the characters. The game follows your character, known as the Captain, and his or her merry misfits of a crew stumbling their way across the Halcyon system. The timing for The Outer Worlds was near perfect. I say near because the reveal for the game was a lot more popular than the actual release. The Outer Worlds was announced at a time when Bethesda was doing something particularly unremarkable with the Fallout license, that being Fallout 76, a multiplayer RPG that released to very negative reception. The Outer Worlds was announced roughly around the same time 76 launched, and Obsidian was championed as the king of RPGs for a time, until the game released. The Outer Worlds was a critical darling, scoring 80s and above all across the board and receiving a few awards along the way. The catch, however, is that hardly anybody was talking about it. Reason as to why it didn't create much of a buzz is speculative, but if I had to guess, it was most likely due in part to the game's small stature and the timing. To many fans, The Outer Worlds was supposed to be Fallout New Vegas' successor, but as stated before, the game had to cut back on scale. Instead of being a long drawn-out RPG that would have taken 100 plus hours to full completion, The Outer Worlds was more of a bite-sized RPG that favored more quality time over quantity. The purpose of a smaller scale was to create a want for more among the audience, and seeing as how that was the main complaint of the game, I would say The Outer Worlds was a success. Alongside the scale was the timing. By the time The Outer Worlds released, the buzz around Fallout 76's failure was all but depleted amongst fans. During the production of The Outer Worlds, the big green men we all know and might love today decided to acquire a certain studio that we've been talking about for an extended period of time. On November 10th, 2018, it was announced that Microsoft bought Obsidian Entertainment, along with many other independent studios, to join the Microsoft Studios division, thus securing Obsidian a more reliable outlook for the future. Fans of the company were mixed on this, seeing as how Obsidian was an icon amongst the independent studios at the time, but as stated before, Obsidian was always on the lower end of the totem pole when it came to value, something the company was tired of residing in. During the acquisition, Obsidian was already involved with the publisher Private Division to release The Outer Worlds, which means that the RPG would have to land on platforms already agreed upon. As of the time of recording this, the last major game Obsidian Entertainment has released is the 2020 game Grounded. Grounded is a multiplayer survival game where the protagonist is shrunk to the size of an ant and must survive in a backyard full of various insects. In the game, the player character needs to consume an adequate amount of food and water or they will lose health due to starvation or dehydration respectively. The story takes place in the 90s and follows a group of teens who must discover why they have been shrunk to the size of an ant. Films like A Bug's Life and Honey, I Shrunk the Kids gave inspiration to the small team. In order for the team to know more about the different types of insects, the team also watched long YouTube videos produced by insects enthusiasts. The team chose the backyard as the game setting, as Obsidian felt that it was recognizable in an approachable location. Also, they believed that the backyard could be larger than life and have a real sense of danger. The small team worked extensively on the artificial intelligence of the insects, which governed their behaviors. For instance, ants are curious about the player character initially and do not attack. However, if the player builds a base around their food or the player character becomes stronger, the ants begin to see them as a threat. They will attack the player. Development for Grounded began shortly after the release of Pillars 2, when the team at Obsidian was brainstorming their next game. Most of the studio went on to go work on The Outer Worlds, while a small team of 13 individuals began production of this new video game. Like The Outer Worlds, Grounded was also a production when Microsoft bought Obsidian, but unlike the famed RPG, Grounded was without a publisher, thus solidifying Grounded as an Xbox and PC exclusive. In classic Obsidian fashion, Grounded released to favorable reviews and is advocated by many fans alike. What's most curious about Grounded is how different it is from the typical Obsidian game. Obsidian, as you can tell, is an RPG studio, and to branch out and do something this experimental was bold and refreshing. Obsidian is a studio built upon trial and tribulation. From a subsidiary to a failing company, to one of Xbox's most talented developers, the future of this company for once in its life looks bright. So what's next for this eclectic studio? During the Xbox Game Showcase in 2020, Avowed was released. Avowed is a next-gen RPG set in the same universe as Pillars of Eternity. The game is supposed to possibly contend with Bethesda's 2011 hit game, Skyrim. Now, not a whole lot is known about the game, but we know for sure that it is the first-person RPG similar to The Outer Worlds. Avowed will have a big focus on world reactivity, lighting, and next-gen AI systems. Around 100 people are currently working on the game, and it has been in development cycle for 2 years and 7 months of pre-production. The target release window is late 2020 or early 2023. During the Microsoft and Bethesda E3 showcase in 2021, the sequel to our beloved Outer Worlds was announced with a comical trailer. The trailer poked fun at the average announcement of a trailer, saying that almost nothing about the game is done other than the title, that being The Outer Worlds 2. The game is set to feature in a new star system with a new crew. Seeing as how the development is still really early, we won't be seeing anything about this game for quite some time, so don't get too excited just yet. In November 2021, a title called Project Missouri, later amended to Pentiment, was leaked. Supposedly, this will be a small experimental game that will take place in 16th century Europe. It will be a murder mystery game that is not planned to have any combat, similar to the modern CRPG, Disco Elysium. Now in September 2020, Microsoft bought Bethesda as well as the studios that reside under Bethesda. When this occurred, many fans pointed out that the possibility of a new Fallout game under Obsidian was more possible than ever. Obsidian was being very tongue-in-cheek about this, responding to their fans with a simple tweet. Fast forward to 2022, and supposedly is reported that Obsidian and Microsoft are in very, very early talks about creating a possible successor to Fallout New Vegas. Urquhart has stated before that they would love to make a continuation of their beloved Fallout titles years prior, but as of the moment, it seems that the team at Obsidian has a whole lot on their plate, so don't expect to hear anything else for quite some time. Obsidian Entertainment is home to many classic individuals creating some of the most thoughtful, well-rounded RPGs of all time. The studio may have experienced their fair share of negativity in the gaming space, but their time and effort into their games is well worth the struggle and hardship that ensued. The future of Obsidian is looking more positive each and every day, and I'm excited to see what else they can offer us in the future. Thus concludes the history of Obsidian Entertainment.